start by just telling you lovely people a little bit about why I founded THDC 20 years ago with my brother, and then talk you through a little PowerPoint presentation, and then touch on why I think sustainability is important, not just in fashion, but just as a general way of life. So yeah, as I said, my brother and I and another friend Dan, we started THDC 20 years ago to try and bring hemp to the high street. Initially we found out a little bit about the hemp plant and wanted to kind of share this because it's a very diverse crop for not only for sustainability in fashion but also for alternatives to petroleum, to plastic, to paper. This is actually printed on hemp card here. And just it's such a diverse and useful crop that we wanted to share that. So we initially got into fashion because we figured that was the quickest and easiest way to spread awareness of this plant. Looking back on it, I probably would have now got into hemp plastics because plastic is a massive, massive issue. But in fashion, there's been such a takeover of throwaway fast fashion now that it's now more important than ever to actually figure out and work out why you actually buy from the brands that you buy from and to boycott the ones that you don't. Okay, so we founded in 1999 with a mission, as I said, to bring hemp to the high street. So we were first stocked into TK Maxx years ago, the first ethical and organic clothing range to be stocked into TK Maxx, and actually into Virgin Mega stores as well. We're a founding member of the Ethical Fashion Forum about 15 years ago, and we are now ranked as the UK's most ethical independent menswear label by Ethical Consumer magazine. Now, we've partnered over the years with about 150 organisations, charities, bands, music labels to produce ethical t-shirts and accessories for them. We usually partner our ranges with a charity and then work with various celebrities or musicians to try and help promote and spread awareness of what we're doing. From, as you can see, Danny Dyer, not in most people's minds the most ethically minded driven guy out there, but we thought if we can turn Danny Dyer ethical, we can do it with anyone. So we work with a lot of designers, street artists. This is a guy called Mau Mau who produces a lot of our designs. And come up with graphics around campaigns, whether it's deforestation, war, globalization, and then kind of work with these artists to create designs. This was a piece that we did on my warehouse wall back in 2012 during the Olympics. Seb Coe was talking about delivering the most ethical, sustainable Olympics, and then he got all of his lovely sponsors such as Dow Chemical, Visa, Lloyds, Nike, Coca-Cola, and McDonald's, all the usual suspects. So we wanted to raise awareness of what sustainability actually means, and we kind of do it through art and activism. So here's a few pretty staggering and shocking facts about fast fashion and about throwaway fashion. So although we mix our t-shirts, we either make our t-shirts from hemp mixed with organic cotton. Conventionally grown cotton is extremely thirsty and uses a lot of chemicals. So one t-shirt, to give you an idea, will use about 4,000 litres of fresh water to produce one t-shirt. So if you imagine the kind of throwaway fashion culture that we're all living in, people will quite often buy a t-shirt from, say, Primark, use it once or twice, chuck it away, without really having an idea of what it's actually taken to produce that shirt, not just in resources and water, but also in whose lives have been impacted from producing in these kind of conditions. So, as a brand, THDC's clothing is a little bit more expensive than, well, it's more expensive than, say, a Primark shirt, but when you compare it to the standard other kind of independent or non-independent, like large label cotton t-shirt, it actually comes out about the same. People sometimes ask me why a hemp t-shirt or why one of our t-shirts might cost £27 to £30. And what I would say to them and what I say to you is that you shouldn't be asking why our t-shirts cost £30, you should be asking why a Primark t-shirt costs £3. You know, that is really that's really the question. Why do our socks cost £12 Shouldn't be asking that. You should be asking why you can go into H&M and buy 5 pairs of socks for £7 and who has suffered and what has actually gone into producing that sort of garment. And that's not just in the fashion industry, that's from everything from plastic to gadgets to whatever. You really need to kind of think about it, look at what it's selling for, and then look backwards throughout the supply chain as to why things are so cheap and why we expect to buy things so cheaply that will then break or fall apart after a couple of months. Excuse me. So in the same way, we shouldn't question why a free-range chicken or an organically grown fair trade chocolate, piece of chocolate, costs so much. Again, what we should be asking is, how can KFC and Nestle be so cheap? Ultimately, cheap products are cheap for a reason, because people have suffered to allow us to have these products at such a cheap price. Oscar Wilde famously wrote once that a cynic knows the cost of everything and the value of nothing, and it seems as consumers of fast fashion, we've become very cynical recently. So when I started THDC around 20 years ago, and people knew nothing about organic or ethical or hemp clothing, I used to have to cold call shops and tell them that I have started a label that's selling organic, hemp, ethically grown products. And I always thought this would be a positive USP, and they go, oh, that sounds great, it's going to save the world. Actually, it would have a detrimental effect, and people go, I know what hemp clothing is like, I know what sustainable organic fashion is like, because they have a preconception of what it would actually be like. And they were right, because there wasn't a lot out there, so we kind of set about to try and change this. So what I wanted to do was prove that style and good ethics don't have to be mutually exclusive. About 12 years ago, I was actually asked to go in for a meeting with a corporate social responsibility manager of a very well-known high street chain that I'm not going to tell you. And I had a really positive meeting with this guy, and he was given the role of Director of Corporate Social Responsibility. And we spoke about doing an ethical organic range within this massive brand. He was very excited. He went back to the owners of the brand, and then a couple of weeks later he called me and he said they loved the idea, but unfortunately if we do a collaboration range about organic or ethically produced clothing, all of their customers and shareholders will say, where's the rest of it produced? And how's the rest of it produced? And we'll say, met this geezer at a trade show once and he said he could do it at this price, so we did it. And that is the reality of a lot of brands. They'll find the cheapest price, they won't go and look at the factories, they will spend money, essentially their budget, on PR to make it look like they're trying to do something positive, as opposed to sending people out to make sure the people in the factories are treated well and to actually source sustainable fabrics within the company. So you might have also seen a lot of bamboo textiles coming out recently. Bamboo is fantastic for things like toothbrushes, bicycles, furniture that you can see out there, when it's actually used as a fabric, a cheap fabric, as a viscose. It's not just bamboo, hemp viscose, viscose from all sorts of rayon, from all sorts of types of sustainably grown plants. They'll actually use a bastardized process with loads of chemicals to turn it into a really super soft fabric. So a lot of big high street brands will put out a bamboo or a so-called sustainable range, talking about the benefits of growing this plant, but they won't actually tell you about the processes they've used to turn this into a cheap fabric. So always be aware that big high street brands will quite often greenwash by telling you we're doing an eco range or whatever. You really have to, I think it's our job and our responsibility as consumers to ask these questions. Ask who the manager is in shops, ask whether it's you're going into a Pret a Manger to get a sandwich and they try to give you a bag for one sandwich. Just ask why, ask these questions, you've got two hands, you don't need a bag. Ask the managers how the clothing is produced, because if we don't start this conversation, then they're not going to then be able to feed it back up the chain. So I think for whatever you're buying, whether it's clothing or food or whatever, ask these questions. So seasonal fashion is by its very nature a non-sustainable industry. It encourages frivolous consumption and the belief that we need to constantly upgrade our wardrobes because whatever we bought a year ago is so last season. I'd suggest you should take pride into buying things that last and buy less of them. In terms of cannabis, because THDC is ultimately a cannabis brand, and the perceptions about cannabis have changed very much over recent years. The word marijuana is essentially it has racist connotations. It was invented by the propaganda machine to scare people off of the type of crazy weed that Mexicans and black people were smoking. They were going mad and raping white women and listening to jazz music. So I'd implore you to never use the word marijuana because it is purely racist. In terms of cannabis, when people hear about cannabis, so what they tend to think about is a drug. I want them to think about cannabis, hear the word cannabis, and think about the product that can produce clothes, can produce engine oil, produce paper, produce medicine, and also plastic. So we've all heard about the devastating effects of plastic and that it's having on the planet since Sir David Attenborough started talking about it quite recently. And world governments have known this for about 30 years, and they have all, without exceptions, been slaves to big oil. So anything you can make out of petroleum, you can also make out of plant-based plastics. So by extension, we've also had an alternative to filling up our cars with petroleum ever since Rudolf Diesel's engine was built to run off of biofuel. Around the same time, Henry Ford built one of his earliest cars from hemp fiberglass, which was 3 times stronger than steel. But the US was busy running a massive smear campaign about hemp and cannabis while spying steel and petrochemical industries and peddling man-made synthetics instead of natural plant-based alternatives. So it's not too late for us, and we don't have to give up our way of life. So this is the most important thing. People scare you into thinking you just have to become a communist country and you have to stop buying anything. It's not true. You just have to demand that your government makes and provides different products. Okay, so hemp is the most suitable and financially viable option, and by far the most diverse as a plant-based product. It's our responsibility to question our buying habits, especially from large businesses. So, as I said, we don't have to give up our way of life, and we don't have to give up our cars, our packaging, our plastic, our paper, our engine oil. We just need to make alternatives to what we currently use. So single-use plastic bags, cups, packaging should have been outlawed decades ago. There have always been alternatives. So you can pick up a self-filtering water bottle or buy a metal water bottle and avoid buying bottled water. So recently you've probably seen in the news Extinction Rebellion have called for a total fashion boycott for a year. Fashion is one of the world's most polluting and wasteful industries. The danger, I would argue, with calling for a total boycott on all fashion is that smaller, sustainable brands that offer an alternative to fast fashion will also suffer. It's not so much about us buying clothes, food, energy, holidays, it's about what we buy and who we buy it from. 10 years ago, THDC hosted an event at Clarence House in association with the Red Cross, and the idea was to show people about how to turn old garments into something new with a pair of scissors and a sewing machine. Planning on hosting another event in November along the same sort of lines, turning old t-shirts into shopping bags, dresses, cushion covers and other garments. Not only does it save waste, but it also means you actually have something totally unique, which is something to be proud of. So this is an example of one of the styles that we had, one of the patterns where you turn 2 hemp t-shirts into a dress. So it's really, really basic, it's really easy, but it's also something that you can, vintage is back. This is kind of next level vintage. So it's taking 2 things that you never were again, turning into something else. I mean, this is 10 years old, so it might look a little bit out of date now. So if you have a fashion label, you're planning to start one, what I would advise you do is go and visit the factories yourself and actually take pride in going and speaking to the people that make your clothes, making sure they're okay, document it, because that is the most clarity that you can provide, and if you can show that you're actually going there and taking pride in who's making your clothing and that they're true to the world, this is the best PR you can possibly have for your country. As a consumer, one thing that you can do right now to make dramatic positive change is to switch your energy supplier if you don't already have natural green energy, solar power and stuff. So Good Energy, Ecotricity are both very reputable brands. or you could just go onto like a compare the market site and look for cheaper. It's not going to cost you like it's going to be negligible the difference that you're actually having to pay. Obviously, outside of fashion, then other things you can do is eat less meat. No one likes being told to eat less meat or to not eat meat. Taking your diet into consideration, meat has a massive impact on global carbon emissions. As does travelling by plane or petroleum-powered cars. But these days there are so many options with not even meat and non-meat-based diet, but there's still not a lot of affordable, efficient ways to travel that can actually compete with budget airlines or cars. So what I would say to take away the view is that the power of change is in your hands. You work too hard these days for your money to give it to scumbag brands that don't care about you, that don't care about the planet. If you decide not to buy from a brand, whether it's Nestle, Coca-Cola, whoever it is, I've got so many boycotts I can't even tell you, they will very quickly change their ways. You know, if you just don't buy from these brands, then they will soon change their ways. Just look at what happened to McDonald's years ago. I mean, they're still not a good brand, but they turned all their eggs free range, all their milk is organic because of people deciding that they want something better. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I'd give you something to take away. Just go home and you can Google a documentary called The Age of Stupid, which essentially is like an hour and a half documentary about why I do what I do. There's another film called Food Inc., which is also amazing, which will probably change your eating habits if you need any encouragement to change it. And that's pretty much it. I just want to thank Shanice and everyone for having